In this video, we're going to take a look at the updates to Nuke for this latest release. Nuke has now adopted Nuke Studio's internal frame server. Frame server can execute render tasks by passing them over to separate Nuke processes running in the background. This will make better use of your system resources and allow you to continue working on your script while renders are completed in the background. When you select render from a write node, you now have the option to use frame server, which is checked off by default. If we begin to render, we no longer have the progress bar. We can find the render progress in the background renders panel. From here, we can see the processes of the current render. We can see the current status, be alerted of any errors, as well as cancel renders individually or cancel them all. Each write node in the Nuke script will have its own entry. These entries will be reused appropriately throughout the current session. Frame server also keeps a log of all the render tasks from the session. We'll have information on the total time per frame, as well as frame errors. We can also use frame server to render flipbooks. We have access to render using frame server in the flipbook dialog, and it will work the same way found in the write nodes. In your preferences under performance, you will find the threads and processes section. From here we can control frame server preferences. Here we can control how many background Nuke processes to launch. We also have the option to set custom limits on these processes if needed. The last thing we'll look at is the new system status bar. From here we can see an overview of the system resources that Nuke is currently using, as well as the status of the frame server. The icon will show us when frame server renders are in progress and allow us to restart frame server if needed. The already powerful Denoise node inside of Nuke has been given an upgrade. A new temporal processing feature means that it will now use nearby frames to improve your denoise results. In the node properties, there's a new section. We now have attributes for temporal processing, frame blending, and temporal frame offset. When we look at the output, we are now seeing the temporally processed denoise result. We can toggle temporal processing and the node will behave like it did in previous versions of the node. We can fine-tune the temporal processing using these two attributes. The frame blending knob will determine how many nearby frames will influence the final output. If we set this to a high number, the nearby frames will have a greater influence. If we set this to a low number, there'll be little influence and we're relying more on frame-to-frame processing. The default setting of 0.1 is a good number to start off at, but you might want to adjust this depending on how noisy your footage is. With the temporal frame offset, we can specify the number of frames used for processing. We can increase this to a maximum of 10. In most cases, you'd be adjusting this to the 2 to 3 range, and that will give us great results. A new lift blacks toggle has been added. When you're working with footage that contains super blacks, denoising can lead to some strange artifacting. Sometimes a plate needs to be prepped with color correction to offset these areas. This toggle will internally lift the blacks right in the Denoise node and help reduce the plate prep and artifacting. There's also the preserve edges toggle. If you find that after denoising, the edges in your footage are too smooth, you can enable this to prevent oversmoothing. New to Nuke is the addition of an expanded selection of toolsets. If you are a new or a junior artist, you'll be able to dive right into Nuke and use the powerful compositing techniques that Nuke has to offer. Toolsets include multi-pass render compositing, keying workflows, smart vector workflows for paint and cleanup, as well as particles, rig removal, and relighting. Each one of these toolsets comes complete with an example file that you can examine while learning how to put these tools to practice. This way you can examine node by node the thought process, as well as referring to the notes included in the node graph. You can easily download the example files by creating a toolset and locating the examples node. From here you can download a zipped copy with examples for all the toolset workflows.